So Autopilot, Windows Autopilot, is one other way to automate the enrollment of Windows devices into Intune. The scenario for Autopilot typically is that it's about new devices that are going to be introduced in your organization. So the scenario that Microsoft describes for Windows Autopilot is that there's a vendor of hardware, for example, HP or Dell or Fujitsu or well, any other type of hardware. The idea is that we want these vendors to ship the new computers directly to the end user. So that is the idea. So when a user gets a new device, we can, well, take it out of the box, we can start it for the first time, and then in that case, this computer will be indeed starting in the UBI mode, the out of the box experience mode. Typically, out of the box experience will first ask about a language. Second, it will ask about a region for your device. And then the third thing that we want to happen is that this device is then going to be connected to the internet. Okay, I have been drawing better internets, but let's say this is the one. Windows is hard coded to whenever it touches the internet for the first time in UBI mode, Windows is hard coded to connect to a database that is being hosted online. That is the Autopilot database. And what Windows is looking for here is any clue on device management. So what Windows wants to know is, hey, is this device that is now in UBI mode registered with this database? And if so, what mobile device management ID, so which mobile device management solution is going to take care of this device from that point on? Now, in order to sort of prepare the environment here for that information and to make sure that this device is, the database is able to share the information with the device that the end user has, we need to do some preparation. Well, one of the goals here is that the Autopilot database knows about the mobile device management solution that is used for that computer here. Now, if we check out Intune, then we know that Intune has its own database. Let's name this the Intune database. Intune also has a component which is responsible for communicating with the client. This is called the company portal. And Intune is part of Microsoft 365. And as part of Microsoft 365, we have Azure Active Directory here. And Azure AD is, is bound to this Intune environment. It's all part of the same tenant. Now, Intune itself has a value, which is the mobile device management ID, the MDM ID. The MDM ID, by the way, is the same thing as the Azure Active Directory ID that we have in our tenant. And one of the things that we do automatically when we configure Azure AD and Intune and when we have a tenant, what will happen? Let's get this fixed. What will happen is that Intune is going to exchange information. Whoa, I want to make this look better. Intune is going to exchange information with the Autopilot database. So there is a communication happening between these two components. Now, one of the things that we want to do in the end is that because of that connection, Intune now will also be aware of the mobile device management ID that belongs to this Intune environment. Now, still, there is nothing about the device here. So one of the extra steps that we need to take per device that is registered in this database, we need to have, well, some information. One piece of information is the device's serial number. We also want in this, we also want in the Autopilot database the value of the hardware hash, which is the result of a mathematical calculation against the hardware that we have in the device. And we want to add to that piece of information for that device, we want to add the mobile device management ID. So when this UBI mode device is requesting, well, information from the Autopilot database, we can then first of all recognize the device based on its serial number and the hardware hash, and we are able to tell this device in the first place, like, hey, indeed, whoa, indeed, you are registered. Now, there's something, my mouse is super sensitive today. So first of all, the response would be, yes, we know you based on your serial number and your hardware hash. And second, here you got the MDM ID to connect to. From that point on, the UBI mode or Windows will connect to the company portal that is part of that MDM ID, and it will then, well, start the enrollment process. The big question is, how do we get information about this device into that Autopilot database? Well, there's different ways to do so. One way is that we can ask the vendor. The vendor can, for example, take the serial number and the hardware hash of the devices that they are selling, and you can tell the hardware vendor to go and say, hey, you know what? I want you to put that information in the Autopilot database, and because we are the customer, here you will have our mobile device management ID that you can add into this, which would automatically match with our Intune environment, and therefore we could go to, for example, HP or Dell and have them do it. The service is not something that the hardware vendor will always do. For example, with HP, I think it only works for those, what is it, those elite stuff. And because that's the higher end type of devices. Well, that is, HP is typically crap, but the high end stuff is okay, right? That's it's and for other vendors like Dell or Microsoft, well, they should be able to also put that data in there for you. Otherwise, if they are not going to do it, you could also go and ask the vendor for giving you a .csv file that would also contain that same information. We could go in the database here, and we could import that .csv file ourselves in our Intune database. The result will be that it will be synchronizing that information with the Autopilot database. It will add, obviously, the MDM ID to the record, and it will then also be in that same database. That is another way, right? So you can have the CSV file. And in some cases, if the device is not new, if the device is already in use, but you just want to make sure that the next time the device runs in UBI mode, it will still be part of Autopilot. Maybe because you want to, maybe sometimes you need to do a factory reset or anything. Then we also have another solution, and that other solution is that we can take an existing computer. So in this example here, this is the scenario where the scenario here is that this is a new device. However, the scenario could also be that this is an existing device already in use. If that is the case, then we could go in here and, well, take the serial number and the hardware hash out of the device and put it into the database ourselves. If you want to do that on this device, you need to go and go into PowerShell, right? So you want to be in PowerShell, and then in PowerShell you can go and run a couple of commands. One command is the first command you want to run is install script, and then the get Windows Autopilot info. That is this command will install the get Windows Autopilot info script on the device. And then the second command you can run is, well, get Windows Autopilot info. Oh, let's try one. Yeah. Get Windows Autopilot info. And then what you can do is you can run this with different outputs. You can say, hey, I want an output file created, which, for example, allows you to create a CSV file yourself. And in that case, you can take the CSV file to Intune, import it into that Intune database yourself. Or you can also go and set, instead of the output file command, you can also run the online as the switch here. The online switch will want you to sign in into Azure Active Directory. Therefore, the Azure Active Directory ID, which matches the MDM ID, will then be added into that environment straight away, because with the online switch, you are actually going to push it into that database straight away. Otherwise, just like this CSV file here, or so with this CSV file here, or this CSV file over here, you can take it to the Intune portal and do the import yourself. That is something you could implement in that case. This is the scenario for Autopilot. This is how to get the information into that database, and obviously add the MDM ID to it. In this case, we are going to add the MDM ID, which is based on the Azure Active Directory ID that we know, because in the online version, you need to sign in. You need to sign in into Azure Active Directory, right? Therefore, we know what ID to take. And then it's in the database. If an Autopilot device is in the database, it will also be listed in Azure Active Directory as a device. So Autopilot entries are Azure Active Directory devices that you can look for. And this is important because you want to take these devices and maybe put them into an Azure Active Directory based group, because at one point, if this device is still in UBI mode, if it receives the mobile device management ID, the next step is that this device will then go and connect to the company portal here. And here the auto, or actually it's the enrollment process starts. Now we can customize the enrollment process, because in Intune you can create an Autopilot profile, and the Autopilot profile tells the client in what way to enroll into Intune. First of all, you can make the decision whether this device is going to be Azure AD joined versus hybrid AD joined. That is a setting you can do. You can change, for example, you can tell whether or not the user is going to hide or show the end user license agreement, or you can hide or show some privacy related settings. You can choose. You can say, hey, is the user that is performing Autopilot, is that going to be a standard user versus a local administrator? Because a user might also become a local administrator. Or you can go and hide the user type selection, right? And then we make the decision ourselves. Also, in an Autopilot profile, you can create a device naming policy. You could, for example, say, hey, this device is a Windows device, So you could do something like, hey, I'm going to use a win dash, and then you could do something like, oh, and now I want the serial number of the device to be shown. And then the computer name will become win dash and then the serial number. Or you could do something like win dash or MDM or any kind of prefix basically. And then say, hey, I want to put a random amount of numbers. I want to do some random numbering, and I want, for example, to have X amount of numbers there, like 5 or 2 or 3 or whatever you think should be all right. So we do have some options to, well, to create or manage the computer name in the end. An autopilot profile first is about, well, making sure that the device is being, well, added into Intune exactly this way. And second, in Intune, we can also create something else. We can create an enrollment status page. And the enrollment status page, well, it informs the user about the process, right? So what is going on? And well, maybe, and we haven't talked about this yet in this course, but we will later, maybe as part of getting the device managed, we want to install Office applications like Outlook and Word. Maybe we need other applications to be installed. Maybe we need to do some updating. Maybe there's some settings that we want to push in different ways. Well, that is the information that we get to see. And you could also go and say, and you can force the user to wait until certain well, deployments have happened. So or are done. So you could say, hey, we are now in the process of enrolling the device into Intune. However, we are going to install Microsoft Edge as a browser. We want to install the Office client applications first. Once that is done, the user is allowed in Windows and start working. Maybe in the back still something is happening. Maybe there's still some other applications that you are installing in the back. That's okay, but we at least need a couple of apps before we allow the user in. These are actually the things that we can set up for that enrollment process. This is how Autopilot, this is what Windows Autopilot does. I want to show you a couple of things about this before we move on. So if I am in the intune.microsoft.com environment, this is my Intune environment here. Now, if I check this environment and I check out the devices, then if I'm looking for Autopilot, I want to be in the device enrollment section. One of the things that you may like, I typically generally do not really show this a lot, but you can check out device enrollment and then go for enroll devices, check out Windows, and here we see, for example, the Autopilot program, and here we can add our devices. Or nowadays Microsoft is making a change to what everything is going to look like. So you can try the new view for device management. It's a little bit more interactive. Then still here in device onboarding, there is enrollment, there is still Windows, and we still have the same settings, but it's just you can make this look a little bit better maybe. So here we have Autopilot. Now, one of the steps that I want to take obviously is to have a device in Autopilot. You can see in my case, I already have a few of those devices here. So the computers that my kids use, an old laptop that I found somewhere, you know, the Alienware beast. That's, you know, that's a 7.5 kilo laptop. No, it came with a wheelchair. It's, man, it's it's so heavy. My virtual machine that I use for making these drawings here, all part of are all here. You can upload those to get the device. Well, you can upload that information about Autopilot here. The way to do so is, well, or you could have the vendor do everything for you. But let's, for example, check that autopilot script. So what I need is I need to be in an environment where there is PowerShell. So here we are in the PowerShell window. Let me just oh, you know what? You know, I like that terminal view because it allows you to make your command line interface a little bit cooler. You can see that it has this little blurry shade on it, like it's a 1985 screen that I'm using. So the first command you want to be running is install script get Windows Autopilot info, like this. This will download the script from a online repository and it will then install it on your computer. You can imagine downloading scripts from an online repository might not be the most secure solution. That is in fact something that you will first have to sort of trust. Now it already is installed in my computer, but it says, hey, but you have 3.8 here, which you could actually which you could also install. So in my case, I'm going to do the force switch because then it will override my current version with the later version. So here we go. Finished. Once this script is installed, you can then run get Windows Autopilot info, right? If I just run it, the result is this. You will get the hardware hash, but well, it's way too much information for my screen here, so I may need to do something else. Another option is to go in and say, hey, I want to format this as a list FL, because then we get the same, we get the entire hardware hash here. This is it, right? This is the hardware hash. This is the serial number of the device in this case. So maybe what we can do now is say instead of showing it on screen, I want to do something like this, right? I want to create this into a CSV file. Done, right? And now what we can do is we can check out that check out the CSV file here. So let's just go in and check out that Excel-based CSV file, and it will basically show the same info. If you want, if you are gathering more than one device's information, then you can also go in and say, okay, I'll just create multiple lines here with all the different pieces of information. So this is the hardware hash, the serial number as well, just like that. So with this file in place, we could go and now we could, for example, open up the Intune portal. So you want to be in intune.microsoft.com, and from here in devices, in enrollment, in Windows, and then in the autopilot devices, you can just go in and say, hey, import that file, take it from somewhere, it's here, open it up. It says, hey, we indeed found correctly formatted lines, and then choose the import button. In my case, I'm not going to do that because the device is already there, but just to give you an idea of what that would look like. So you import it here. You can synchronize to make sure that, well, we are getting the latest info from the autopilot database. So this is the synchronized with the autopilot database. It may also get data from the autopilot database into our database, right? Into this database. It will then show, and these devices are actually going to be listed in Azure Active Directory. And one of the cool things about this is that you can create a group in Azure Active Directory to well, put all those devices into a single group based on their based on the fact that they are in fact autopilot devices. So if I check out my list of all devices here, oh, by the way, if you check out just in Azure Active Directory list of all devices, then what you'll notice is that some of the devices here, they have some of the devices here, they have this little icon here, and this in fact means that this is an autopilot device. So now we know which devices here are autopilot devices. So we can actually recognize it from here. If we want to create a group based on that, in my case, I already created a group, but if you want to create a group like that, what you will need to do is you will need to go in and create a group that is configured to have a dynamic membership type. It has to be a security group, and the security, the rule to do the membership is this. So if I want to create a group in my Azure Active Directory that contains all autopilot devices, then what I can do here is go in and create a security group. I'm going to give this a name. One of the things that I'm going to do now is I'm going to use sort of a group naming convention that I decided to use at a later stage. We haven't talked about Azure Active Directory and how to deal with groups so much, but one of the things that I like, especially with Azure Active Directory, is to create groups which have a certain purpose and only use those groups with that purpose. So recently in this tenant, I started to create groups with the MDM prefix, because in that case, I know it's about Intune stuff or Defender for Endpoint stuff, and nothing else. And I will also only use those groups with that specific purpose. So here I'm gonna create an MDM autopilot devices group. From now on, I know that any group starting with MDM, I will only use for the device management purpose. I could put a description in here. Typically, you would have to do this. So, for example, all Windows Autopilot devices, something like this. Now I want to go and create this as a dynamic device group. I will have to create a query that has to make the decision, okay, what device is this going to be? And in my case, I'm just going to click the edit button, use Control V. This is the syntax that we need. So the property, the device physical ID contains ZTD ID. ZTD ID is short for the zero touch deployment identity. This is the only line of text that I would need here. So what I will do here, let's just quickly create a screenshot of this. So that is the autopilot device group. Group.png, group with an R.png. And then we'll just put that in here. We can also validate if or if this rule syntax works. So I can, for example, go in and add, my Alienware beast, an iPad, maybe an iPhone, my daughter's laptop, my son's laptop, my second laptop. Well, a couple of devices that I have here. Let's click here, and now you will see if it actually gives us positive results. So my query here seems to work. We can also go back in the rules, right? And we can start adding expressions. For example, hey, but I want the device operating system, or I want the device manufacturer to be, for example, for example, if it contains, let's say, Microsoft, like this, right? We can also check this out. Then we can check out the rules again, validate the rules again, and apparently it doesn't really understand. But if you check this out, it says, hey, it doesn't really work like this, right? So we don't really get those, we don't get the results here. So I can also go and let's remove them. So apparently none of the devices are sort of matching, but well, I should have something here. So let's try again. Still not in, still nothing in here. Um, Maybe I did something weird here, where the device manufacturer contains Microsoft. Let's just do something wild here. Let's take that. Still no, still no. Okay, oh, interesting. I was actually expecting Microsoft to be shown. For now, by the way, that is something that I don't. Oh, yeah, and yeah, device manufacturer contains Microsoft, but I'm gonna remove this. Let's go back again. Ah, look at that. So maybe let's just go in and check back, validate the rules. Maybe that is something that I would have to sort of dive in once more. Let's just add a couple of devices again. Ah, I screwed it up. Nice, Alex. Nice. So let's oh man, why am I doing this? Let's try and get this fixed by doing, okay. Man, why did I do this? It worked, and now I screwed it up. All right, so let's just let's go back. I actually did this before, right? So let me just quickly check out this membership rules here. So device manufacturer contains Microsoft. I'm still, and property ID. You can actually check it out like this. Add devices. This one, maybe this one, this one. Now you can see that it shows the devices that are Autopilot and Microsoft. And actually, this is what I wanted to show you. You can actually go and say, hey, but what does it match, right? So, for example, if we do have an answer which is not okay, we can check out the details, and it says, hey, but there's something wrong about this, right? And this is what it is about, like hardware ID, zero touch, and in this case, you can see that the device manufacturer is not Microsoft, but Alienware. That's the interesting part. So that is what we are going to be looking for. And then if I check out this device, it says, well, the device manufacturer is Apple, so it's not Microsoft. This device is Microsoft, but not Autopilot. This device is indeed Microsoft and Autopilot, therefore we have a positive match. So that is how you could work with those groups. The next step is that, well, obviously we want a certain Autopilot profile to be fixed. So here under Windows Autopilot in deployment profiles, we can now dive in and we can create a profile, for example, Windows PCs. Let's give this a test value. Then we can configure the out-of-the-box experience. Is this going to be a user-driven or a self-deploying enrollment? Now, user-driven means the user that is going to perform this step will need to sign in with Azure AD, and then the device is going to be bound to the user. Or in some cases, you want the device to deploy completely automated without user interaction. For example, devices that are kiosk PCs or devices that are classroom PCs in schools, or well, in any situation where there is not a designated user for that device, self-deploying might be the better solution. If it's self-deploying, obviously nothing is going to be shown, except we can, for example, apply a certain device name template. If it's a user-based or user-driven deployment, we have a choice. Is this going to be Azure AD joint, hybrid Azure AD joint? If you choose for hybrid Azure AD joint, we know that the device is not going to be only enrolled into Azure AD, but it will also be joined with a local on-premise Active Directory domain service. Therefore, that might be a little bit, that might be a little bit, well, crappy, because we need to be able to connect to the domain controller, or we can skip that for now. We can also go and say, okay, I want this to be Azure AD joint. Do you want to show or hide the license agreement? Do you want to show or hide the privacy settings? Do you want to show or hide the the account option, and well, we could, for example, say we're going to hide this and the user is going to be a standard user. The language, keyboard selections, and device name templates are also here. And we do have this one here as well, the pre-provisioned deployment. If you check out what this says, it says, if you check this out, it will go and say, okay, if you press the Windows key 5 times, it will run Ubi without user authentication. It will then start to sort of do everything it can do without knowing who the user is or without the user interaction. Then, if we shut down the machine, it will, the next time it will start in Ubi mode again. So the IT department, for example, could go and say, hey, I am going to run some, some pre-work before we are handing over the device to the user. If we do so, then for the user it will in the end become a way smoother experience when we enroll this. Now, if we are happy with this policy, we can then go in and say, okay, we are going to do the assignment. We will use a group that we created, and in this case, I could choose, for example, the Autopilot devices group, and that would be getting these kind of settings. That is what one of the things you could do. In the end, when done, well, the next time a computer gets into Autopilot or in Ubi mode, it will get that. The enrollment status page is a page that allows us to, well, configure a little bit what the user is going to see about, well, the deployment. Do you want to show app and profile configuration? Yes. Is there like a timeout, and do you have an error message, and what would the error message be? Do you want to start logging? Do you want to, what applications would you want to wait for before the user can start using the device, for example? Well, this is different settings that we can do in that enrollment status page. Now, in the deployment profile, we had the opportunity to choose hybrid AD joint. If a device is not in your office close to a domain controller, but you want to do hybrid AD joint anyway, you can then install the Intune connector for Active Directory. It will connect your local Active Directory to Intune, and then Intune will communicate via this connector, and it will tell your on-premise Active Directory about this new computer, and the next time that computer reaches the domain controller, the hybrid AD joint is being completed. It's like an extra feature here as well. This is how Windows Autopilot works. I am not going to show you how it works, because then I would have to reset my entire computer. I'm not really looking into that. But what you'll notice is that the very first time that the device is run in Ubi mode, it will then connect, and it will then show you to what organization the device is going to be enrolled. There is one thing that we can do as sort of an extra here. If I check out my my Autopilot devices, then we can also go and say, hey, but you know what? This device belongs to a certain user. So what we can do here is we can take one of those devices, select it, and we can click Assign User here. So in my case, I already did that. If this device, in that case, comes into Autopilot, it will also show the user's name. So for that end user, when you, and the funny part is, this could be a brand new computer that we have received from a vendor. We take it out of the plastic, we start it for the first time, and in 3-4 minutes, you get your name, your organization with logos and everything. And that for the end user must be a, well, a trusty environment. It says, hey, Alex, welcome to your organization, sign in with your account, and we will fix everything for you. Well, that is quite cool if you are able to assign the user to the device, just like that.
Does this also prevent others from logging into it?
No, it will not prevent others from logging into it, but it is sort of giving you the personalized experience. One other thing that you might like is that if you are in Ubi mode, you can also hit Shift FT and go into a command line interface. If a device is not yet in Autopilot, and you don't want to manually have to run that script from a full-blown running Windows, you can also run the get Windows Autopilot script from Ubi mode, and then have it upload information about the device into Autopilot database. Wait, let's say 10-15 minutes, and then move forward, and it will also help you with that. So that is what Autopilot is all about.